Hey everybody. So today what we're going to do is a review of in-text citations. Tomorrow when you get back to school, we are going to be looking at our race writings and making revisions and things like that. And one of the things we want to focus on are our in-text citations. So what you're going to do is you're going to go obviously into the folder in Schoology, and I want you to watch this video first, and then I want you to go to this paper here. In this paper, let me see if I can adjust this a little bit. In this paper here, this is a review of all the different ways that you're going to use a parenthetical citation, and I just kind of wrote them in rules. So if we think about this, first of all, rule number one, if you're using a complete sentence before your quotation, you're going to use this thing here, this colon, okay? So you have to, of course, understand what a complete sentence sounds like in order to use that, right? So if I was saying something like, ooh, that's some big text, isn't it? If I was saying something like, Mrs. Labarca always repeats the same thing. That is a complete sentence. So now I'm going to go into saying what Mrs. Labarca always says. Mrs. Labarca always repeats the same thing. So in this case, I'm going to use a colon, and then I am going to add my quotation, and I would write whatever it is, of course, that Mrs. Labarca says all the time, like, I am such an awesome teacher. Haha. Okay. And then if I had a page number, I'd put that there. So that's rule number one. Rule number one is if you have a complete sentence first, then you're going to use a quotation. Rule number two is what we use most often, and that is when you're using a quotation, you need to have some sort of lead-in, and this is what we typically use. The author states, Romeo says, Juliet repeats, something like that. The key is you're looking at this word right before your quote, and you have to ask yourself, is that word a verb? Remember that a verb is an action word. So states, explains, expresses, believes, demonstrates, anything like that is a verb. If it's a verb, you're going to use a comma, okay? And a lot of times we're forgetting that comma right now. So let's change our sentence from before into a situation where it would need a comma instead of a colon. So in this case, we don't need a complete sentence. I'm just going to say, Mrs. Labarca says, or maybe I want to use the word repeats since that was part of it. Mrs. Labarca repeats, comma, quote, I am such an awesome teacher. And then I quote my page number. Okay, that's type 2. Rule number 3 is if rule number 1 and rule number 2 do not apply, then you don't use any punctuation. So if it's not a complete sentence, if there's not a verb before it, before my quote, then I don't do anything, okay? And this is kind of part of our little bit of our issue too. So a lot of the times we use the word that. So let's say we're going to take our same sentence that we've been working on. Mrs. Labarca says that, and now I'm going to quote, or that she is, quote, such an awesome teacher. Okay, and I'm going to put my number at the end there. So there's 3 different ways of doing it, but you really have to pay attention to what you're doing here. Mrs. Labarca says that, and this is kind of messed up too. She is such an awesome teacher. Okay, there we go. What I wanted is this word not to be a verb before that. You really have to pay attention to what you're doing, and this might seem like a little thing to you, but this is important in the grand scheme of English. So if we come down here and we look at these example sentences, they're messed up, okay? I'm telling you right now, they're messed up. So number 1 says, in his book, Creative Schools, Ken Robinson states, reform isn't new in education. So I'm going to tell you that in this sentence, the lead-in and the punctuation here, something's going to be wrong. And possibly something in the in-text citation at the end will be wrong too. Like, for example, hint, hint. Down here, should not be 16 Hansberry. The author should come first, so this should be Hansberry 16, okay? But if we're looking at this first one, in his book, Creative Schools, Ken Robinson states, so let's look at this word right here. First of all, is this a sentence? In his book, Creative Schools, Ken Robinson states. No, because you want to know, like, well, states what, right? So rule number 1, nope, doesn't apply. Rule number 2, is the word before the quote a verb? An action. States. Well, yeah, that's an action. I can state something. So this should not be a colon. This should be a comma. So I want you to type or rewrite this sentence using a comma. So you're going to do these 6 examples. Okay, think carefully about all of them, and then you're going to submit them to me. Okay, we'll go over them tomorrow. Good luck.